Starting off at number 10 now, we have the virginal ghost. This is a term used to describe those grudge-type apparitions that you've probably seen in horror movies with the hair over the face, usually dressed in white. One day, a man who lived on the top floor of an apartment building woke up to the sound of a knock at his door. He lived alone and rarely got visitors. He walked to the door and asked, "Who's there?" After a few seconds, a voice said, "Count to 100 and don't make a sound or you'll die." He opened the door and there was nobody there. He was still quite scared though, and so he closed his eyes and started to count to 100 in his head. When he got to 49, he opened his eyes out of curiosity, and there she was, right in front of his face. Next up at number 9 now, we have plastic surgery. Now, plastic surgery is a big market in South Korea, and as such, horror stories have sprouted up around it. This story starts with a man sitting on an empty subway car when a tall, thin woman sits down in front of him. Her long, dark hair covers most of her face, but he can see she's wearing a surgical mask. As the doors close, he catches her eye. He smiles. She asks him, "Am I pretty?" He replies, "Yes," and then she starts to take the mask off. There's a huge wound from ear to ear, exposing her bleeding gums, teeth, and muscles. "Am I pretty now?" she screams at him. She takes out a scalpel and moves towards him. The doors open and he runs for his life. Next up at number 8 now, we have the organ thief. This is quite a modern South Korean urban legend coming from the city of Gwangju. Screenshots of a text conversation between two friends appeared on Facebook there and went viral. One of the friends was warning the other to not take taxis there at night. They said that one of their friends got in a taxi while drunk. The taxi driver then put a needle in their neck. They lost consciousness and were defenseless. When they came round, they were bleeding from their stomach and lying in a field on the outskirts of the city. He was rushed to hospital where doctors found he was missing a kidney. The fear of these organ-stealing taxi drivers became so much that city officials said it was actually affecting the taxi business in the city. Alright, next up at number 7 now, we have Dalgyal Guishin. This is what's known as a traditional type of Korean ghost dating back in legend hundreds and hundreds of years. It's notable because the ghost is said to appear with absolutely no facial features. No eyes, no nose or mouth. Some of them even lack arms and legs. They're often referred to as perhaps the most terrifying spirits in Korean folklore, as even just looking at one can cause instant death. Alright, next up at number 6 now, we have the Back. The story goes that a married couple with a young son were always fighting every single day. After years and years of this, it got so bad that in a sheer rage, the father murdered the mother. He covered up the crime and nobody else suspected a thing. The only strange thing was the boy never seemed to complain about the absence of his mother, and so he asked him, "Son, why aren't you calling out for mommy? Most little boys would want their mummy to be with them. Tell me what bothers you." The little boy looked up and slowly replied, "I'm fine. I was just wondering why you're always carrying mommy on your back." This is one of many similar stories found across the land. Next up at number 5 now, we have sesame seeds. This is a strange urban legend that seems to scare people about coming into contact with sesame seeds. A girl had heard that taking a bath with sesame seeds in the water would be good for her skin, so that's exactly what she did. She sat in the bath for hours and hours. After a while, the girl's mother became concerned and went to check on her. When she opened the door, she found the girl was covered in the seeds which had sunk deep into her flesh. The daughter was crying and trying to remove them with a toothpick. There's one for any of you guys who hate the thought of holes in your skin. Alright, moving on to number 4 now, we have the bathroom girl. This one is kind of like Moaning Myrtle from Harry Potter, but about 100 times more creepy. There are stories that in some of the old Korean schools with their dimly lit bathrooms live the ghosts of girls who have killed themselves. It's said that she now haunts the stall where the event took place. How do you know which stall it is? Well, the toilets have been said to flush by themselves, the doors slam with nobody around, and sometimes you can hear her cry or even catch a glimpse of her in the mirror. The most gruesome by far though is that sometimes she is said to emerge from the stall and ask you if you will use red or blue toilet paper. If you choose red, the ghost will then cut you open. If you choose blue, the ghost will suffocate you. I probably just wouldn't wipe. Next up at number 3 now, we have ghost money. In this urban legend, a member of the South Korean Mint went away on a business trip. During the trip, his daughter was abducted, murdered, and then dismembered. After a lengthy investigation, nobody was tried for the crime. It was believed that this lack of justice would turn the girl's ghost into an angry spirit that would seek revenge. Because of this, the Mint began to place images of her body parts and parts of her name on South Korean currency in the hopes that this would appease her. The Mint has denied all knowledge of this. At number 2 now, we have the loan shark. A loan shark is someone who lends people money, often illegally, at extremely high interest rates. Sometimes, if they don't get their money back, they take matters into their own hands. There's an urban legend from a small small village in South Korea. Farmers there had to make a mass grave to bury cattle in who had died from disease. Not long after that, they heard a human voice calling out from beneath the soil. By the time they had dug through the dirt, the person buried among the cattle had already died. An investigation found that they owed a lot of money to a loan shark. This has apparently happened dozens of times across the country. And finally, number one now, we have oysters. This is a really weird urban legend coming from the South Korean coastline. Apparently, one day a guy was walking along the beach when he slipped and fell on a sharp rock that cut his knee open. He washed it quickly and put a bandage over it. When he got home, it started to itch, but he didn't want to remove the bandage in case it just made things worse. He took it off after a few days, and to his absolute horror, tiny oysters just covered the wound. It turns out there had actually been oyster eggs on the rock he had fallen on, which had gotten into his wound. They were protected by the bandage and fed on his blood until they had rooted themselves in his leg. Yeah. Starting off at number 10 now, we have 1212. The story goes like this. One night, a Korean girl named Sun Hee was at school. It was late and she was studying in the library with a group of other students from her class. All the lights were on, but the rest of the school was in darkness. After a while, Sun Hee went to use the toilet. She told her friends and then headed down the dark hallway to the bathroom. A few minutes passed, and then in the library, the other students began to hear a faint tapping noise. It was quiet at first, but got steadily louder. It seemed to be coming from the window. When they looked out, there, standing in the darkness, was a pale woman. She pressed her face against the window, but seemed to keep her eyes shut. One of her long, crooked fingers was tapping on the window. Then, one of the students gasped in horror. The woman wasn't closing her eyes. She didn't have any eyes at all. There were just dark holes where her eyes should have been. Then she raised her fist and smashed the glass. All the lights went out. In the bathroom, Sun Hee was about to wash her hands when she was plunged into darkness. There was silence. She was too far from the library to hear the screams as the woman slaughtered the other students. She stepped back into the library and stopped dead in her tracks. The bodies of the other students were everywhere. Shaking with fear, her mind raced as she tried to figure out what had happened. Then she heard footsteps coming from down the hallway. Sun Hee dropped to the ground to play dead. She heard something enter the room. It made a rustling sound as it moved. Then there was a whisper. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. Sun Hee kept her eyes closed and prayed. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. She felt the presence draw nearer and heard the voice getting louder. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. As it came beside her, the counting stopped. Sun Hee remained paralyzed with fear. There was absolute silence. After several minutes of this, Sun Hee thought the woman had gone. She slowly opened her eyes. The woman was crouching directly over her, staring into her eyes. She had one pale, bony finger pointing straight at Sun Hee's face. 1, 2, she said, before plucking her eyeballs out with her fingers. Yes. Okay, we started off pretty intense with that one, didn't we? Let's keep it going now as we move on to our number 9 now, which is the Cuckoo Man. This urban legend began to spread around Korea a few years ago. There were rumors in schools about a crazy man who was terrorizing students, the Cuckoo Man. They say that he would lurk in alleyways and dark streets, lying in wait for his next victim. One story involved a group of schoolgirls passing by. They heard a voice saying, "Cuckoo, cuckoo." When they turned around to look at him, the Cuckoo Man would savagely attack them. Some say that he used a baseball bat, others say his weapon of choice was an axe. Either way, reports of this happening became more and more frequent. One of them involved 20 to 30 schoolgirls walking down the street when the Cuckoo Man jumped them and started hitting them all with a baseball bat one by one. He only stopped when the police arrived, at which point he fled into the night. Some say there is one way to stop the Cuckoo Man from attacking you. If you're walking down the street and hear a strange voice behind you saying "cuckoo, cuckoo," you must also reply with "cuckoo, cuckoo," and then run for your life. Moving on to number 8 now, we have the MP3 kidnappings. This urban legend appeared around 2010 and has been spreading in some form or another ever since. People say that kidnappers in Korea have had much easier jobs ever since people started listening to music with their headphones. It was around 2010 when listening to music like this became very widespread in South Korea, and that's about when the reports of the kidnappings began. People say that kidnappers were driving around dark streets waiting to spot someone with headphones blasting music in their ears. ears. And then, when the innocent person is distracted, they are bundled into the back of a car and taken away. The phenomenon began spreading across the whole country and was even talked about online. Many blogs and forums told the story of a female middle school student who was walking around one night, headphones blaring. She was kidnapped by 3 or 4 criminals who wrapped tape around her mouth and then assaulted her. They then returned her to the spot where they found her. Although these may just seem like stories, it has resulted in some South Koreans developing a real superstition about listening to loud music alone, especially when walking along dark and creepy streets. Next up, number 7 now, we have the handsome man. The story goes like this. 19-year-old Karuko lived on the 14th floor of her apartment building. One night she was coming home late from university and took the elevator up to her floor. She was alone, but a moment before the doors closed, a handsome man stepped into the elevator with her. He smiled and stood quite close to her. They chatted for a while and the man said that he lived on the 13th floor. When they reached that, he got out, turned to face her. His smile turned to an evil one. He tilted his head and said, "I'll see you upstairs." Then he pulled out a knife and laughed manically as he ran up the staircase. Before Karuko could do anything, the elevator doors closed. She tried to stop the elevator by hitting every button she could, but nothing worked. When she got to her floor, the doors opened and there he was. She was never heard from again. Some people in Korea believe this is the reason why elevators now have a stop button, and they'll be happy to tell you Karuko's story to show you why. Moving on to number 6 now, we have the sesame seeds. The story goes like this. One day a girl was worried about her skin getting old and wrinkled. She was obsessed with improving the look of her skin constantly. At first she used normal products, but then felt she needed more than that and started to explore stranger techniques. One day a friend of a friend told her that if you put sesame seeds in your bath, they will help your skin stay youthful and glowing. The girl had heard a lot of techniques, but not one like this. Perhaps this was a secret method that would satisfy her forever. She rushed home and ran a bath. After pouring a huge bag of sesame seeds, she jumped into the bath, where she stayed for hours. Her family told her to get out of the bathroom eventually, but the girl refused. She wanted more time for it to work. Her mother grew suspicious and kicked the door down eventually. To her absolute horror, she found the girl in a shocking state. Every last seed had attached itself to her skin pores and wrinkles and sent roots down into her skin. Her daughter had a calm but crazed look in her eyes. She was trying to remove the seeds one by one with a toothpick, but all that came out was her trickling blood splashing onto the bathroom floor. Next up at number 5 now, we have the eyeless woman. This urban legend comes from north of Seoul. There you can find a strip of highway that connects Goyang to Paju. It's called Jeuro, and it's a road that's notorious for heavy fog that's been blamed for a number of horrific car accidents over the years. At least that's what the officials say. You see, many locals believe there is a supernatural cause behind the accidents. Many drivers have claimed to have seen a young woman wearing sunglasses stood on the side of the highway at night. It's only when they get close that the drivers realize there are no sunglasses. Instead, her eyes are actually gouged out and absolutely hollow. The shock of seeing her sends drivers careering off the road and to their untimely deaths. Moving on to number 4 now, we have the cockroaches. This South Korean urban legend will freak out anyone with a fear of creepy crawlies. The story goes like this. One day a girl's stomach started to hurt really bad. She didn't see any reason for this, and so she went straight to the hospital. The doctors took an x-ray which appeared to show what they called foreign elements inside her. They took some more detailed x-rays and discovered that what they were actually looking at were cockroaches inside her body. Somehow a cockroach's eggs had ended up inside her, where they had hatched into fully grown cockroaches, happy of the fluids and warmth. They showed no signs of wanting to leave and had to be removed through surgery. Many people now check their clothes twice for cockroach eggs unless they want the story to come true for them too. Next up at number 3 now, we have the dead dream. According to some people in Korea, there have been reports of dead family members appearing in people's dreams. One such story involves that of a man who dreamt his grandmother was beckoning him over while she was waist deep in water. He wanted to go to her in the dream. After all, he did miss her, and she was still his grandmother, even if she was behaving really creepily. Something didn't feel right though. He felt in danger, even though it was just just a dream. The next day he told his wife about the dream and her eyes widened. His wife explained what the dream meant. She said if you go into the arms of a dead person in a dream, especially if they're in water, it will be a sure sign that your soul is about to be stolen. The husband said he kept having the same dream night after night, but each time he could feel himself getting pulled closer and closer to her. He was only just managing to wake up in time. Then one day they realized they had kept one of the grandmother's possessions in the house by accident instead of leaving her to rest with it. The family believed this is what tied her spirit to the house still and was causing the dreams. After they paid their respects once more, the man's dreams stopped. At least for now. Next up at number 2 now we have fan death. This is a well-known urban legend in Korean culture that fans not only cool people down, they can also kill them. They are said to do this in a number of different ways. One way is hypothermia. A person's metabolism is said to slow down at night and make them become more sensitive to heat. Some people believe this makes them more prone to hypothermia and that essentially a fan really can freeze you to death. Then there is the slightly more creepy reason, asphyxiation. Some believe that fans will suck up oxygen and blow carbon dioxide towards this sleeping person. This will slowly kill them in their sleep. It seems that this urban legend is very prevalent in Korea. In 2006, a South Korean government group warned of asphyxiation from electric fans and said they can kill people, especially elder patients or those with breathing problems. And finally at number 1 now we have the cockroach face. Yes, we're returning to cockroaches now for our final story. It goes a little bit like this. A guy had some bad acne on his face. He was desperate to cure it, perhaps a little bit too desperate. He told his friends he would do anything to get rid of the unsightly scars the spots had left on his face. They told him to go see a local shaman who apparently had a very special method for treating acne. He didn't ask any questions. Like I said, he would do anything for a cure. The shaman sat him down and quickly told him exactly what he needed to do. He told him to find a cockroach before going to bed. He would have to put it next to his pillow just before going to sleep. Sleeping with this cockroach by his face would make the scars go away. The guy didn't ask any questions about how this would work and went home. He found a cockroach, left it right by his pillow and tried to get to sleep that night. The next morning he woke up, he looked in the mirror and was amazed to see that it had worked. His scars were all gone. But then, on closer inspection, he saw that the scar holes were not gone. They were simply filled with dozens of tiny, oozing cockroach eggs. I hope you guys haven't eaten recently because I feel a little bit sick. Starting off at number 10 now we have the haunted Korean woman's dormitory. The story goes like this. Back in 1999 at a small rural university there were 2 seniors called Kang Ji-hyun and Lee So-yeon. The 2 women were healthy and happy for a long while, but then things started to change. Both had been complaining of sleeplessness and nightmares. In the day they said there was a strange man on campus that was harassing them. One of them arrived home one night with her dress torn. She was emotionally shaken up. These strange events wore them down, slowly withering them away. They skipped classes, stopped eating and showering. One of the last things they were heard saying was, "The man is watching us in the bathroom." On October 19th, they were found dead in their rooms. After they were buried, other students in the same dormitory began reporting mysterious sounds. Doors were being knocked on and doorknobs turned from the outside. Whenever people went to investigate though, there was nobody there. Lights began exploding on the ceiling, glass would crack on the windows. Then the sightings began. Students reported seeing 2 girls claiming to be Ji-hyun and So-yeon walking around the campus. As people went to investigate, the girls would naturally disappear. These days people say the ghosts have spread to other universities in the area, but nobody has ever been able to figure out what exactly happened to the girls and who that strange man was. Moving on to number 9 now, we have Hong Kong Grandma. This is a really creepy story told around some parts of Korea. It originated in the 1980s and has terrorized children ever since. Children were so frightened that they refused to go anywhere or stay alone after this story. Legend says there was an old lady who used to take the plane to Hong Kong with her cat to visit her grandson. On one particular trip, the plane crashed. Both the grandma and her cat died. Her spirit was restless because she was so devastated about dying before she got to see her son one last time. They say that in this grief, the cat's spirit and the grandma's spirit fused together. The result resultant ghost was a sort of hybrid of the old woman and her cat. When it made its way back to Korea, the ghost was spotted by many people, following them home before killing them. The paranoia about this ghost reached such a peak that this story even appeared on the news. Next up at number 8 now, we have the ghost of Jeju Road. Jeju Road is a strip of highway that runs north of Seoul. The locals know all about the story of this road, but it's not really them that need to worry about it, it's the travellers that are passing through. The road is notorious for bad weather. On many nights the fog is so bad that accidents happen. However, speak to any locals and they'll tell you that the fog is a sign of a supernatural presence there. Drivers claim they see a young woman with sunglasses standing by the side of the road. When they approach her, they realise she is not wearing sunglasses and that her eyes have actually been gouged out, and now they are nothing more than hollow dark pits. They quickly dash out of there, not wanting to find out what comes next. Coming at number 7 now, we have the elevator to hell. Many Koreans know of a legend that instructs people on how to get to hell on an elevator. They call it hell, but the best description is that it's a place where it's always nighttime, there are no lights, no other human beings except yourself. In any hotel, you have to take the elevator at night on the 1st floor and go to the 4th floor. Do not step out though. Go to the 2nd floor, then the 6th, then the 2nd again, and the 10th, and then finally the 5th floor. On the 5th floor, she will come into the elevator, the girl. Do not look at her, touch her, or even go anywhere near her. She is not of this world and wants to take your soul. She will ask you where you're going. Do not answer and press for the 1st floor instead. If the elevator goes to the 10th floor, you have succeeded. The same number combination must be pressed in order to return to this world. It's very important to get the number right, otherwise you could be lost in this hell or in the land between it and this world forever. Coming at number 6 now, we have Yu Kwan-sun. She was a martyr at the age of 17 after being arrested and imprisoned during the Japanese occupation of the country while protesting for independence. Now, due to her famous story and her bravery, many classrooms around Korea and on school campuses have her portrait or statue on display. Because of this, many stories have arisen about those items, and apparently they're haunted. Legend says that on March 1st every single year, the night of Independence Movement Day, her statue will walk around the schools and will be chanting Korea independence forever. If that's not enough, it's also told that if you say her name at a portrait of her on this night, her eyes will slowly move to meet your gaze. Really creepy. Moving on to number 5 now, we have Bunshin Saba. This is a creepy game that originated in Japan but has since spread to Korea, partly because of stories of it going very wrong. The Japanese name is Kokuri-san, and it's been compared to like a Ouija board sort of game, and I'm sure many of you guys have heard stories about that. The game needs a partner, a pen, and a piece of paper. First, take the pen with your partner and draw a circle. Then you say Bunshin Saba, come to me please. Then you should feel a presence. You should ask, are you there? If the spirit wants to communicate with you, the pen will start to move. You can continue to ask things, but do not take your hand off the pen until it's all over. Do not break the pen or tear the paper, otherwise the spirit will curse you. You really don't want that. Coming at number 4 now, we have the drugs. Now, I found this one on Wattpad. It's a personal story told by a user known as Chaineem the Queen. This is what she said in her own words. I heard this story before when I was a kid, but it still gives me the chills. In Busan, there was one house that was forbidden to rent or even go to because in that house were people who had died. There was a loving father there once, a loving mother, and 8 kids. One day though, the father tried drugs to ease the stress of his life. He began to become more abusive to his family until one day his rage made him kill all of his children and his wife. In a panic, he put their bodies in a closet. 5 years later, a woman rented the house. She reported feeling cold hands on her neck and hearing children shouting, "Help us, please have mercy." One day, she was found dead in the very same closet he had put his family in. Moving on to number 3 now, we have The Boy. This one was told by user Chloe14 on a site that's all about ghost stories. Now, she said it became known in her part of Korea quite well. She used to be a cheerleader for an American high school in South Korea. They usually went to one of their rival schools on a Friday, had a game, slept in their gym, and then had another game the next day. On one such weekend, they were setting up their beds in the gym after the Friday game. They made them underneath the basketball hoops. Soon, they were asleep, but after a few hours, she woke up to the sound of someone dribbling a basketball across the court. She looked around in the dark and didn't see anything. She told herself she was just hearing things and so went back to sleep. She woke up a while later to the exact same noise. This time when she looked around though, she saw a boy about the same age as her holding a basketball and staring right at her. She was startled by his cold, angry and very sad look. She gasped and looked away in fear for a moment. When she looked back, he was gone. The next morning she told one of her friends from the other school all about her experience. That girl asked her to describe the boy. As she did, the girl's face went pale with shock. She said the description matched with a boy from the school who had committed suicide there just 3 days before. Next up at number 2 now we have Elevator Psycho. This is a story that may put some people off from using elevators, especially when they're alone or at night. A girl was going back home late one night. She took the elevator alone. Just when the doors were closing, at the very last second, a man stepped inside. It was almost as if he had done this before. He looked middle-aged but generally nondescript. The lights flickered in the elevator. There was a slight bump. Suddenly, he broke the silence, asking her, "You live on the 13th floor?" The girl wasn't really expecting any question and she stumbled. Yeah, she replied. "Oh," he said, "I live on the 12th floor." At that exact moment, the elevator stopped on the 12th floor. He stepped outside and said goodbye. "See you," she said. Then, just as the doors were closing, he turned back towards the elevator and pulled a knife out of his coat pocket. As the doors came together, he said one word with a creepy smile: "Upstairs." And finally, number 1 now, we have the scratching. This one comes from a user called Brandy on that same site that I talked about earlier where people share ghost stories. In her own words, she said, "I came to South Korea to be with my husband who is in the army. I had been here for 5 months. I had been living in my apartment for over 4 months. About 2.5 months ago I started getting the icy feeling like I was being watched. This went on with no happenings until last night. My husband was training in the field. I am all alone in the house just like any other night. I got changed, went to bed and called my husband. I got to sleep around 12:30 a.m. I slept for about 2 hours when I started having a dream that I had never had before, but instead of what normally happens in the dream, an unknown force was on my back with 2 handfuls of my hair holding me down. I woke up to find that my head and my whole body was in the exact same position as it was in the dream, almost as if it had happened in real life. I blew it off thinking it was just my imagination. I fell back asleep a short time later. The dream resumed where it had left off. This happened one more time before I decided to just stay awake. It was about 5 a.m. in the morning. I'm not exactly sure. I heard a Korean man's voice talking. It was very deep. I could not make out any words that I know. It sounded as if he was hissing the words. By this time I was already terrified. I heard knocking and the chairs being scooted around. This went on for about an hour. Then it started scratching my walls. It started soft and short at first. I ignored it until it got harder and louder, increasing a lot every time. Finally, I could not take it anymore. It felt like my heart was going to burst. It was beating so hard. I got up and turned on all the lights in the house. It stopped. I got dressed and looked around to find all my chairs had moved. Little things were moved, and then I saw the scratch marks on the wall. It was about 6:30 a.m. in the morning when I left. I'm looking for another apartment now. There is no way I'm going to stay there and let it keep getting worse and more violent.